and it'd be 10 in the morning. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this year's SLO conference. And we are really thrilled, that you are here to our presentation of Show, Don't Tell about making learning visible through authentic assessments. I'm Mauricio, and here's my presenting partner, Francesca. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So who we are.
My name is Francesca Astiazaran. I have been a lecturer in various universities for about the last 13 years. I started working with Mauricio when I was a brand new lecturer here back in 2012, 2013, when I was coming out of graduate school with subject matter expertise, but no sense of like how to design a course or an assignment. And as the senior instructional designer here, he really helped me through that. I also work as test development lead for writing placement with the university writing program at UCR. And that is a little bit about me. I also want to say, excuse our lack of background, but it wouldn't allow us both to be in the frame. So you get the bookshelf for background.
I get the bookshelf.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Francesca. And I'm Mauricio. I am a senior instructional designer with California State University, San Bernardino. I've been here for about 21 years. I'm also a Cal State product. I got all my 3 degrees, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate here at Cal State. And I've been teaching at the university for about 12 years as a lecturer, but I have, experience teaching abroad in Colombia, etc., and various sort of disciplines. So that's who I am. And, Francesca, actually, we met because she was the editor of my doctoral thesis. Right. And so our friendship goes back, quite some time. All right. Oh, all right. So what is this session about? We're hoping more people joining in the room. We're hoping to discuss how cross-disciplinary examples, of what we have done in our classes highlight how we both use scaffolded assignments to lead, our students to apply the concepts, they're supposed to gain and to learn in our classes through real world context. Sorry. And the reasons why we do that is because, we want them to produce evidence of growth and competency, not just simply, true false sort of testings and stuff. We hope that those of you who are here, that you leave here motivated, to design learning experiences where your students demonstrate rather than merely report what they have learned, right? So the session outcomes is hopefully by the end of this session, you will leave with practical examples of structuring authentic assessments that engage your students, as well as leave with actionable approaches that provide observable outcomes. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay. All right. Before we sort of jump into it, this is one of those conversations that, I had with Francesca, as well as, basically the foundation of what I do with the faculty that I meet. And knowing that I have my master's and my doctorate in education and curriculum development, etc., I really focus on helping faculty understand the importance of scaffolding instruction, as well as how those support authentic assessment. So some of the core features of that scaffolding instruction are process-oriented, right? So what does it mean? That is sequence. They're often low-stakes tasks that, build on top of each other. I always use the sort of the Lego sort of metaphor, to think about those pieces. We use models and examples. And again, that leads into authentic assessments that they have to be real. Lots of drafts. Well, I know that in Francesca's class, there are more drafts. My class, when I talk about it, we don't have as many drafts, but there is a lot of feedback. Revision, reflection, and then resubmission. And so that's, one of the core features of scaffolding when it comes to process-oriented. Then the second component of it is feedback-oriented, which is targeted and constructed and relevant. And actually, you know what? Jessica, why don't you say more?
Okay, yeah. So I'll jump in here on the feedback part as a writing instructor. I give a lot of feedback. Most of my days are spent giving feedback. And I think one thing that is important in scaffolding instruction is that the feedback is targeted, that we're giving feedback to certain pieces of a project at certain times, and that the feedback is what I would call construct relevant. So it's really tied to what you're assessing and it doesn't lose focus sort of in other directions. And then obviously it has to be set up so the feedback is timely, which goes hand in hand with actionable. If we don't give students time, then it's difficult for them to take action on the feedback. And then feedback also should be proportionate to the kinds of activities, which means as these activities build, as these kind of low stakes tasks build, so should the student's confidence and autonomy. So we imagine giving more feedback in the beginning and kind of less in the end as the student has gained more independence. And then I believe that there has to be an expectation that application of feedback is expected and required. So feedback without any teeth to it tends to be less effective. So typically I work the application of feedback into the grading, and that is an expectation.
Thank you, Francesca. And sometimes when I talk about feedback, with faculty, one of the things that we like to discuss, besides this or in addition to this, is if faculty is asking students, to provide like peer feedback, the importance of modeling, showing the students and teaching the students, how appropriate feedback is. Because oftentimes I have faculty, that come to meet with me, and they're like, Mauricio, students are not giving, each other good feedback or, constructive feedback, etc. And I usually ask them directly. I said, well, what's your feedback to the students, right? First of all, and they sort of realize that their feedback to the students is sort of not very based, on feedback, not very constructive as well. And so once you start to help faculty or faculty start to understand the importance of feedback, then they can model that to the students, right? If they are, in any position of giving, peer feedback and stuff. So, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to talk today about a project that I deploy in my Writing 20 class, which is intermediate composition. It would be like the second step in our sort of three composition classes that all students must either take or have some type of equivalent to. And I've got the SLOs here. The SLOs, I won't read them to you, but they're highly tied to rhetoric, genre, understanding context, argumentation, evaluating the effectiveness of arguments, and then students understanding their position in relation to other arguments. So the ability to take in multiple perspectives on the same topic, without falling down rabbit holes, easily believing other information, needing everyone to get over to your side in order to feel that you've been convincing or offered something worthwhile. So yeah, and then by the end of the class, they need to be able to construct a convincing and reasoned argument using the persuasive techniques that we've gone over throughout the quarter, using the research techniques that we've gone over throughout the quarter, and then also thinking about how if that information is presented in various contexts, it might need to change for the audiences in those various contexts along with their expectations. So the students in this class, UCR is highly representative of just California's general population. We have more than 50% first generation college students. For transfer students, it's higher, closer to 60. And we serve mostly students from historically underrepresented backgrounds. And students can be anywhere from freshmen to juniors. Freshmen are kind of rare. If we see a freshman in this class, it usually means that they tested in, like they had some sort of AP scores that allowed them to jump a class. And so that's rare. Typically, we see mostly sophomores, some juniors who have put this class off a little bit. So what I'm going to describe as a final project, for my class, it takes the grade of a final exam. Our program requires that we have some kind of final assessment that is worth 15% of the total grade. So I do this project instead of a final exam in this class, and it is based on the completion of a multi-draft research paper that is done earlier in the quarter. And the paper develops over two big chunks, but a lot of smaller in-class work and sort of guided discussions and things like that. The theme of the paper is advocacy, and I choose that theme really just so one, students choose something that they care about, that they care enough to maybe get engaged with, and two, that students see that in academic writing, most of the time it's about locating a problem, right? Like we don't want to write about things that have already been addressed to death. So what it does is it uses the essay content that's been created over multiple drafts and given feedback to create a publishable, and I'll put publishable in air quotes, artifact. So they can choose between an Instagram page, a YouTube video, and an informational pamphlet on the topic. Now, if they choose the Instagram page or the YouTube video, they do have to commit to publishing those things and making them open and visible to the public, at least until I assess them. For students who aren't comfortable with social media or don't want to publish something, who may feel shy about it or just don't want to partake, they can also choose the informational pamphlet. Um, each choice comes with a unique grading rubric and grading criteria, and these have kind of been developed thoughtfully, but also through trial and error, deploying this project over multiple quarters. So it's kind of a balance between giving the students agency, but still providing them with something that is really rigorous enough to be a final assessment. So they really have to dig into whichever information genre that they choose. If they choose an Instagram page, we look at, professional sort of advocacy Instagram pages and what are their features, and they have to sort of mimic those and engage with other pages. If they choose a YouTube video, they have to kind of choose a genre. I've had everything from like story times to skits. I had one student do a yoga tutorial that because she was advocating kind of for sleep. And so she built this yoga tutorial into her informational YouTube video. And then if they produce a pamphlet, like it really has to be a pamphlet. Like they have to use pamphlet making software and they have to get into it. Like, what are the features of a pamphlet? And that tends to be more difficult than students expect because they are taking information from something larger. So they really have to think about how do they distill that. But the overarching kind of goals that span all three is demonstrating application of feedback, like from essay drafts, making the project visually appropriate and appealing, which has to do with visual rhetoric, which we touch on a lot throughout the course. Working within the constraints of each genre. Again, they can't just dial it in. They have to really make it look like it's a thing, as polished as possible. And then revising and repackaging the essay into something for a new audience. So they can't just slap their paragraphs into the captions. Like they have to really like reimagine that information and think about how would an Instagram audience receive this? How can I transmit this same information in a YouTube video without reading my essay as a script? How can I distill this information down enough to fit it into a pamphlet? And then it requires a final reflection on the process and kind of their overall communicative goal and how they felt about it. It tends to be a lot more work than students expect. I get a lot of that in the reflections, like, oh, I chose an Instagram page because I'm always on Instagram. But this was like a ton of work. And so, yeah, sometimes they're not always happy about the work, but they do seem to be happy with the product. So that's encouraging. So the way that this kind of fits with the authentic assessment paradigm is instead of just showing me like what they know, which is kind of like pieces of the essay, like, can you define like introductory information from body paragraph information? Can you introduce a source? Do you know like dynamic verbs and those kinds of things? Um, Instead of, demonstrating their knowledge of that, they're taking it all together and using it to accomplish a real world communicative goal, which is advocacy in this case. And they're presenting their research to a public audience, although I will concede that in the case of the pamphlet, the audience is imagined, right? I do have them in their reflection. If they choose the pamphlet, they have to say, like, if they were to deploy this pamphlet or publish it, who would they be publishing it to? Would they print it? Would they disseminate it via email? Things like that. So they at least have to imagine the step of defining an audience. And then they have to work within these real world genre constraints. And, in the case of Instagram and YouTube, students tend to be highly familiar with these genre constraints as an audience member. Like they can all, tell a story time YouTube from a get ready with me YouTube, but they have to actually live those constraints and think through them. And then they have the power within this, thing that they're creating to make design and rhetorical choices and think about how those choices will affect an audience. And that is my project.
That's it? That's your project?
Yes.
Okay. It's always, I don't know why I let her go first because how can I match, what she has done? So thank you, Francesca, for that. My experience, and this is a very specific sort of course. The last 5, 6 years, I've been teaching within the Department of Decision Sciences and Technology, at our business college here at Cal State San Bernardino. And the particular class, which is a supply chain management 5150, is a project management class, but is usually for computer science students. I've taught it, I've taught the same class, but for IST students. And it's one of those courses where the demographics are, mostly juniors, seniors, a few graduates. And so I get students almost, those students that wait until the end and say, this is my last semester. What do I have to do? Like I just need to take this class. It's a requirement, et cetera, to complete, to be able to graduate. And it always makes it a little bit, challenging. Then you have juniors, sometimes that are transfer students that didn't have the experience in college or in their 2-year college before they transfer here. And so they see the course and they get sort of like, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to be a project management, manager. I'm not going to get a certification. Like, is this even for me? And then you have graduate students, getting a master's degree that are here and have high expectations, of a graduate level course. And so managing, the seniors that are checked out because this is their last semester, the juniors that are just coming in, after just transferring and getting the new experience of the university, and then the graduates that just feel like I'm a graduate student, I'm getting, a master's, sort of thing. It's quite challenging, for the particular class. So that's sort of, to give you the context of who the student population is in my class. Now, I know that, we're in the SLO conference, and my class does have 5 different SLOs, but I wanted to pick this one in particular, which is the students will learn techniques to manage people as a challenge, and how, techniques on how the workforce will impact or be impacted by, the project management constraints. What's really interesting is that most students have worked on projects, but they're being like small projects, home projects or something like that, and don't really fully understand how, the project planning and scheduling, execution, culmination or closing, etc., really is, what the process is. And so all of a sudden, they start seeing the syllabus, start seeing all of the assignments, and they start to, basically freak out, right? Like, oh my gosh, what is this? I thought our project is like, this is what I want to do. This is how much money I have. And then I just go ahead and do it, right? So I'm also dealing with this. So this SLO here is particularly important because I needed to manage their expectations. And to be able to manage those expectations is through scaffolding, right? And I've mentioned before, I use that sort of the Lego, analogy, which is like, let's just take it into pieces. Don't think about what part 2 is going to be. Don't think about the final project. concentrate or focus on what we are doing right now. Okay. The final project is a culminating project, right? Depending on the semester, either because of it, mostly because of enrollment. So like if I have a class that is 15 students, for example, then it becomes an individual project. But right now that I'm teaching 28 students, then it becomes a group, project. Now, I could do a whole session about how much students hate group work, right? But the important thing is that I use, their negative experiences in past, group activities or group work in other classes to show them that one of the main jobs of a project manager is to manage individuals, to help them work in teams. And so I sell that idea as in like, I couldn't teach you how to swim if you don't jump in the water. I couldn't teach you how to cook if you don't buy the ingredients and actually cook. So you won't learn, one of those constraints about managing individuals and teams if you're not in a group, sort of project. For those, during the times that I have a small class and they're doing individual projects, I have in-class group activities, right? So they still having to experience, working with other. And it's amazing how these students have just become so anti-group work. Either the high-performing students that feel like they just have to do everything because nobody else is doing it, and the other students that go like, oh, we have a high-performing student in our group, he or she will do everything, and I don't have to do much, right? Stuff. So the final project is made up of 4 sessions. Each session builds on smaller in-class or online activities, and those includes, we do like class activities, in hand. In-class activities. The way that I sort of structure my lecture is on Tuesdays. I do a lot of the lecture to prepare students for the Thursday, in-class activities. And so everything that I tell them on Tuesday, that we discuss on Tuesdays, we then apply it, during the Thursday class. And it's important because I have come to learn and to notice that some of these things can be very theoretical, and one cannot expect that students are reading the books, are reading the materials that we're giving them, are watching the videos, the supplemental, videos. They're not the optional, right? None of this is optional in my class. And I tell them, if I give you something to watch or something to read, there is a reason for it. This is not busy work. But there's always that missing component, right? As an instructional designer, I've encountered a lot of challenges with faculty that have online classes and how do they actually do online asynchronous classes and how they do it. So I make sure that there is time in my class for them to mess up, for them to encounter those challenges, right? So that they can use me, right, in person, or their teammates to research and work through the problem. So that's class activities, online research. Everything that they're doing has to be based on real life research. Class discussions are always very important because these students, as I say, they come from different programs, they come from different academic levels, and they all have that historical background, cognitive background they have. The online discussions and the written assignments, because after all, this is a 5,000 level. They need to know how to write basic like the project charter and reports. Okay. The project itself is based on real life projects. Students choose to develop a project from start to finish. In most cases, those projects are personal and executable. What do I mean by that? Is we don't have the time or the budget, to do theoretical projects. However, a lot of the students will say like, I've been having a project of building a fence, around the property, and I have horses and stuff like that. Could that qualify? We talk about it and everything. So they actually go through it, they plan it, they schedule it, and then they're able to, by the end of the semester, actually, do the project. Other students said, I have my own business and I've been thinking about developing an app, for my business and stuff. Can that be a project? And so they do it. And that's what I mean about, personal. It can be theoretical. Like, for example, the student that has his own business and wants to develop, a marketing strategy with an app and a website and everything. They may not have the resources to do it, but at least we walk through the process of what it would be. And they still treat it as it is, as the project sort of would be. And again, students conduct research and apply directly to the project. So everything that they're telling me has to come from somewhere, not just the book, but real life, sort of projects. And I give them resources for that. So they see how their own project mimics, what the process of, large, projects are. What do they actually do in the end? A written project report. It ranges about 30 to 35 pages. And I know when they see that in the syllabus, they do sort of freak out a little bit. Like, oh my gosh, like I've never written, more than 5 pages. How am I going to do? And I said, don't worry. Remember, this is scaffolded. We're doing it in chunks. There are 4 parts, right? When everything is all said and done, you're going to take those parts, copy paste them, basically, create that one single edited project, right? So those reports mimic the elements of what a real report is. And I have some examples about, like projects that have been done in the past, and PMOs or project management offices are required to post the project charters and everything that they do because of client and stakeholder responsibilities, etc. And so they actually get to see those elements. And most of the students at the end, they say, wow, similar to what Francesca's students say, like they didn't know how much work Instagram was going to be, creating the YouTube or the pamphlet. Most of these students come and go like, I had no idea, how much it goes into a project. But the best part, obviously, we're talking about real life sort of projects, is when I have those students that come to me and say, hey, professor, guess what? So I work at this warehouse and it's a mess and we don't have a project manager, and everything that I learned in the class, I went to my boss and I said, hey, can we do this? And this is how you do it. And my boss goes like, do it. And they just feel, sort of this sense of like, oh, the least expected class of what we're going to learn from, because these are computer science students, most of them, and stuff like that. All of a sudden they took something that they didn't think that we're ever going to need and directly apply it to their job. So that's awesome. So there is a written report, very professional, and I give them examples, and then a presentation of the results. So I tell them at the end of the project, you're going to have to present, right, to the stakeholders and clients. So, present in a professional manner. We do have, sort of examples of what it is. And so they create a professional presentation with the slides. And I tell them, imagine that you were doing a project for the city and then you were going to go into a town hall to present to everybody that is there, right? So think about that. How would you present? How would you present yourself? And that goes from make sure that your room is clean, right? That the lighting is proper, that the audio is proper, that your slides are professional without, any sort of mistakes. And again, these are little things, little skills that they're practicing in the class, so that when they go out, if they encounter any of those situations, they're not feeling like, oh, I never knew that I had to do this. Students have a lot of challenges sometimes, with recording videos and where they do it at home and the audio and stuff. And this gives them an opportunity of, place themselves in a professional sort of environment and present professionally to an intended, sort of real life client and stakeholders. Okay, so that is, sort of my experience. And as Francesca said, how does my project, sort of align with authentic assessments? The idea is that that project, through 15 weeks of work, embeds a lot of feedback, right? I give a lot of feedback. Students have commented about like, thank you so much for, for your feedback, because I have a lot of professors that we just get a grade and we're told what we didn't do right, but not how to fix it, or what needs to be done. So the project embeds a lot of feedback across different stages. And then it actually puts the students, into like student learning, right? By doing a project, they're the ones that are experiencing this. They're the ones doing the research. They're the ones coming to me saying, I'm stuck. I have no idea how to do this, but they're taking that responsibility rather than saying, making the course very theoretical, and telling them, if you were ever going to do it, look at my slides, read the book, and this is how you do it. They're actually sort of doing it. And the other thing is, by placing the students in that student learning sort of responsibility, self-learning, self-analysis, is that it allows them to demonstrate that, performing that role of a project manager, right? Most of these students, would take a passive role in, teamwork, or even at their jobs. They're just quiet. They're just, they see things that they don't like, but they don't speak about it, with regards to projects. But now they're developing some sort of background knowledge for them to be able to say, hey, I just learned about, human resources, or a particular term, like, how do we know how much we need to pay, our workers, and how do we calculate that? What is a discount rate for the, the investment that we need to, sort of have for the project, etc. And that empowers, those students, to use it in their, practical lives. So, you know, it's very easy for me to have them have like maybe like an essay at the end and says, hey, tell me what you learned about project management, right? But that is isolated knowledge, right? We want to make sure that these students think like a project manager. They're able to define the project. They're able to conduct research. They're able to do schedule planning. They're able to document all of their processes and decisions, do an audit of their own project, etc., and be able to present outcomes to clients and stakeholders. Okay, and all of that, it's, obviously it aligns with authentic assessments because these are the things that happen in real life. These are the things that they see real life project managers, sort of do. Okay, all right. Do you want to read the conclusion?
Uh,
I'll do it.
okay, I feel like you more conceptualize the conclusions. That would be great.
In conclusion, 1032. Okay, in conclusion, as we can see, what Francesca and I have talked about, the concept and application of scaffolded instruction that leads to authentic assessments really can be applied through different academic disciplines. Francesca uses it in a writing course, I use it in a project management course. So regardless which course it is, those principles of scaffolded instructions are truly fundamental to set the pathway that reinforces a student's learning, through an authentic manner. They're learning in the classroom and outside the classroom. They're learning individually, and they're learning through, their student or their classmates or their group work. And what's great is that it creates those opportunities for applying those academic skills in real life. Again, most of these students are not leaving. They're not taking this course because they're going to get the, Project Management Institute certification to be project managers. There is, one student that is. But everything that they learn, they can apply to, their real lives, or at least talk to, to someone about what they know and empowers them, in their work. So I think that's it. And burning questions. Francesca chose this gift. She liked the whole burning question, thing. So thank you so much for staying, through the presentation. And I hope that you've, gained some insight or some thoughts about authentic assessments and scaffolded instructions. So any questions? I do see that there is, let me read the...
We can go ahead and close the slideshow so there's a better view.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. How do you set up the group projects so that the students get management experience? Oh, that is a wonderful. That is a wonderful question, and I think I'm still sharing. Let me stop sharing so that it's just here us. That is a wonderful question because so one of the things that I do is we have a couple of activities in which each of the students in the project group assumes the role, the leadership role in it. And so because we have different group activities and group work that they need to do, instead of just like the student that is always going to do it, does it and everybody else just sort of slightly contributes. It is everyone's responsibility to, in every of the assignments, to say the project leader or the main individual that is going to help us to get through, this particular assignment is going to be so and so. And they actually tell me they have to report it. They do submit it as a group assignment, but they say the project manager for this activity was, and then they tell me so how it is. Obviously, it is very challenging when is the semesters in the classes that you're just doing one student because there are only 14, 15 students, but it works really well. Obviously at Cal State, we use Canvas, and you can assign leadership roles, to students on a weekly basis. And so, and there are other activities like in the discussions in which the lead of the group for that week would have a discussion with the group, do the research, and they're the ones that, for example, get to present and say, our group discussed X, Y, and Z. And so everybody gets, sort of accountability, and everybody gets a specific amount of participation. And I have a self and peer evaluation rubric in which, at the end of the semester, they rate themselves, on particular scales and questions about their own contributions and learning, etc. And then they rate each other, each team member as to, what they did and how they feel that the contribution is, etc. I also motivate the what?
Could you open the chat here?
Oh, sorry.
Open it here.
Yeah, let me move the chat on this side. So sorry, the chat was on the other monitor. So I hope did I answer your question? Was this Jamie? Did I answer the question? Okay, perfect. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Charlie. Yeah. Listen, Julie.
Is there anything up there?
No. Okay. Oh, okay. So Julie says, I teach anatomy and have interpreted authentic assessment in the context of preparation for nursing school, development of study skills, and how to express what they've learned. I'll love your perspective on this. Because you're teaching anatomy in a nursing school, I assume that you are a teaching nurse teacher. The reason why oh, go ahead.
So I teach anatomy as a prerequisite. So I'm teaching students who want to go to nursing school, who are just taking their prerequisites at a community college.
Beautiful. Thank you, Julie. Well, and one of the most challenges in a good way, department that I work with that we have here is a nursing school, here at Cal State San Bernardino. And the reason why I say it's challenging in a good way is because they come with the idea of like, we're preparing nurses. This is not theoretical. These are people that are leaving our classrooms with both the know-how and the ability to be nurse practitioners, right? Depending if you're going to go, BSN or RNs, etc. And so what you are doing with regards to, the preparation that your students are having, for studying skills and to express what they have learned, I think it's phenomenal. Like, I would love to hear more about what are some of the activities that you do. I love the fact that you said study skills. It saddens me and when I see seniors that are about to graduate that don't know how to study, don't know how to take notes, don't know how to read or annotate. They just come and they just sit there, and they're just doing things. So I think anything that allows them, and I think what I'm trying to address that I think you're referring to as well is that when we are talking about real life skills, through like authentic assessments, etc., something that we're talking about is also transferable skills, right? Not getting stuck into, well, this is an anatomy course, so I'm only going to learn anatomy things to pass this class, right? But is it, how do you build a foundation in your course, especially because you mentioned that it's a prerequisite for students who want to go, to nursing school, is how is it that I'm going to take this knowledge? You may not be able to practice it. Let's say, like, in your course, you may not have a lab. Again, we will need to talk about the setups. You may not have specific lab or ways to having students practice it in your class, but how do you set the foundation for them to know if you do go into nursing, you need to know, what we are doing here. And so I think part of our role as instructors is to say, how can I best help you develop those transferable skills so that you can go there? One of the hardest things that I hear from faculty is when they come and they say, Mauricio, I'm spending so much time doing remedial training. Like I'm spending 2-3 weeks getting students that came from other classes that they didn't learn what they were supposed to learn to prepare them for my class. So for them to reach where they need to go, I have to spend 1-2-3 weeks of the semester, getting them, sort of like on board and everything, and everybody else is sort of getting behind because there's so much time. So I think what you are doing with regards to helping them develop, study skills, phenomenal. I think all students should have a class on how to study and how to express what they've learned. It's also beautiful because I have computer science students. These students spend hours in front of computers. They're great with coding and programming and how to talk in chats. And it's amazing how sometimes they cannot put a sentence together in real life, talking to me or to his classmates. So I think what you're doing is phenomenal.
I would jump in and just say one quick thing to Julie, and then I'll move on to Charlie's questions. I think, Julie, you're at a real advantage working with a targeted students in a discipline, because like for me, my class is general ed, so I'm getting students from all disciplines. So it's a little more abstract saying like, oh, here's a general life skill, whereas you're able to present authentic assessment in a way that is helpful for career skills, which is, I think, a highly equitable practice. And I kind of wish I was better able to do that. At my institution, we really don't see too many students in the humanities. They're mostly in the hard sciences. So, kind of peddling my humanities stuff to them could be difficult. So yeah, I think that's authentic assessment in career terms is a highly equitable practice. And then Charlie, you said, do you meet with students after they choose the format of their project? And what does feedback look like when you let them choose their subject for advocacy? Okay, so I'll start with the advocacy question because that's where this sort of all begins with their essay. They do have parameters. So like it has to be something that is arguable but not polarizing. So for example, there are certain topics, I won't get into them, they're probably obvious, that I steer students away from, but if they do have to write kind of like a personal position statement, right? Like why do they care about this thing? That's part of their essay. But sometimes, another thing that I ask them is not to choose triggering topics. I don't want them to suffer mentally or emotionally because of the paper they're writing. So I let them know that it doesn't have to be something that's happened to them or like they've experienced. It can literally just be something in the world that they care about. But sometimes they push back. And I did have one student who like witnessed his father being deported years ago, pre all of what's going on now. But he met with me and he told me that he would be okay and he felt passionately about the topic. And it was a little more nuanced than that. They have to have a very kind of targeted, like for example, they can't write about global warming. It's too big. They have to write about some aspect of global warming. Like it could even be like the plastic bag ban. I've had papers on that before. So it has to be pretty specific, but it has to reach out to these larger parts of the conversation. And then after they choose the format of their project, they really choose it in class. So I have a day where I present all of the options. I actually print all 3 rubrics for students and pass them out and let them look at them. And so they spend about half the class period kind of mulling it over. And unfortunately, well, I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, but UCR is on 10-week quarters. So like, scheduling face-to-face meetings with students is totally out. We just can't lose that much class time and I have too many students. So I'll go around the room and get sort of like an informal thing that I take notes on, but they really solidify that choice in a discussion post where they say why they chose that format and give a sort of plan. right, for how they're going to approach it. How much do they already know about Instagram or Canva, if they're going to use that to make pamphlets or whatever. And then if they want to change after that discussion post, they would need to meet with me in my office hours to change.
All right. Let's see, Heidi, right? Yeah. It says, have you encountered any problems with the peer evaluations that we should be prepared for? Yes, groups that are doing well, they think that everybody's perfect, right? That they did everything they needed to do, and they give, each other sort of like great praise and everything. What they sometimes don't realize is that, not all members may feel the same way, right? And so I sort of balance it out. But also, after the midterm, I have an evaluation that asks, how are you at this midterm, sort of point. I also have two non-graded activities, that sort of says, hey, this is just between you and me. How's it going with your group? Right. Because I don't want any surprises. Earlier on, I would get, sort of like at the end of the semester when the project was done, I'll have someone coming in and say, oh, I didn't tell you, but so and so has not participated like in 6 weeks. Like, I don't know what that person is. I mean, they come to class, but they don't answer my text or anything. I'm like, and you waited 6 weeks to tell me, what's going on. And so that helped me sort of redevelop the approach of, in agile, we talk, there's a term about, sprints, which is like every 2 weeks, you sort of check in. How is it going? How are things doing? And I do take, there's part of this conversation about authentic assessments and scaffolding is that it requires work, but it also requires time commitment, right? So I have faculty that say, I don't have the time that you put into your class, Mauricio. And I see faculty and I go like, I don't have the time that person is putting into the class, because I do have a full-time job. But so recognizing that part of the time commitment that we have is to check in with them. I mean, after all, they're still students, right? I cannot expect them to act and behave as a trained, professional or project manager, in a group. So they're still going to have, their challenges. And I don't like surprises. So I don't want to wait until the end and be like, oh, you should have told me 5 weeks ago that things were not working out, sort of thing. So that works, through, constant monitoring, as well as the accountability component that I mentioned earlier, which is everybody will have one assignment in which they are in charge of. And that's usually when issues start to arise. When somebody's going to come and be like, well, it was my turn, but nobody answered my texts. Everybody says they're very busy, or their work or their kids. And so I had to do it myself. And that's when it starts to, some of those issues start to surface. So those are some of the things that I have learned, with regards to that peer evaluation, that I think would be very helpful.
I also wanted to add, just if, well, no one has a question, I think that process-focused scaffolding is really, it has become essential in the AI age. It really kind of helps us identify students who might be struggling, whether that's with the subject or for time or a personal matter early on. And those are probably the students who are most vulnerable to just having AI create something. But we're also looking at things in smaller chunks. So if we see it, we can intervene earlier. I am not anti-AI. However, from what I have learned, that the best practice with AI is that if it gets in the way of your SLOs, right, like then it's got to be kind of outlawed. And that's the case in my class, with some exceptions like research. So yeah, I think that this has always been a best practice, but I think it's become kind of an essential practice, scaffolded instruction, that is.
Well, we appreciate that you stayed 5 minutes after the session was over. I hope that, let's see, I think we do have, yeah, just real quick. So thank you. Sorry. Right after someone said, thank you for, managing the Zoom. wasn't able to do this. So I just wanted to quickly show you. If any of you feels compelled, to contact us, to discuss, anything further on what we presented here today, we're always very happy to do so. With that, thank you so much for your presence here and making this session memorable. I hope you enjoy the rest of today and all of day tomorrow, and maybe we'll meet again in another session. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.